All right, Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. As we move now into verses 13 through 16, Solomon is continuing to give us insight for living a full life in a broken world. In the last verses of chapter 9, he returns us back to life under the sun observations, a life that leaves God out. And we've learned that life is limited by time, chance, and people. God is not. And looking at these observations, it can be disturbing. If you're choosing to live life in your own strength, in your own reasoning and direction, but Solomon is not trying to leave us disturbed with life. Solomon is turning our hearts to the pursuit of a full life that sees the reality of life under the sun through the lens of fearing God and keeping His commandments. And so when we read and experience a phrase like time and chance happen to them all, we shouldn't go into a tailspin, but we should turn to the one who is sovereign over all. We are limited by time and occurrence. God is not. Well, there are two realities that have come to our attention as we study these verses. One is this: don't live with the expectation that living right will always equal prosperity. Even the best and most gifted among us are vulnerable to sudden change. Whether it's untimely injury or circumstances beyond our control, good living and godly wisdom don't guarantee perfect results in this world. Within this reality, we looked at three observations. Life is not always fair. Life is not always fair. The race is not to the swift, it says in verse 11. And so natural abilities and human efforts and even doing right do not guarantee success. We saw that time and chance happen to them all in verse 11b. And life under the sun is unpredictable to man, but not to God. And then life can change suddenly, we saw in verse 12, where it says, man knoweth not his time. The truth is, death and chance are sudden. They are certain and unknown in their timing. And Solomon uses an incredible picture there in verse 12 of fish that are taken in an evil net and birds that are caught in the snare. So life can change suddenly. This morning we'll move into the second reality and its observation, and that is, don't assume that wisdom will always be accepted or praised by the crowd. Great wisdom, especially from poor or quiet sources, can often be ignored or forgotten. Popularity and influence often reward the trendy and the beautiful, not the quietly faithful. Ecclesiastes 9:17 says the words of wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that rules among fools. And as we get down into those three proverbs at the end of the chapter, we'll find that these are the better than proverbs that we have talked about in our previous study. And it could this verse would fit in saying it this way: the quiet words of the wise are better to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. And so as we move into this reality that wisdom will not always be accepted or praised by the crowd, we need to understand that Solomon is in no wise downplaying wisdom. time and time again, Solomon affirms that wisdom is better. Proverbs 4:7 reminds us wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. And so, yes, we ought to pursue and live by wisdom because it is part of living a full life. But the reality of living in this broken world is that wisdom will often be ignored, thwarted, and forgotten because people are broken and fickle. And so don't be shocked or disappointed when you choose to live by wisdom and it is not often appreciated or accepted by the broken world around you. Remember, the law of retribution is not limited to this life only. God, who sees and knows all, will ultimately reward all. If not in this life, definitely in eternity. Maybe you have heard the name of this man. Anybody recognize this man? I didn't think we probably would. Here was a man who saved thousands of lives on 911, and most people don't even know his name. Rick Rescorla was the head of security at Morgan Stanley in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. And on September 11, 2001, when the first tower was hit, officials told everyone in the second tower to stay put. But Rick Rescorla refused. Based on prior threats and drills he had practiced for years, he ignored those orders and started evacuating people. He sang to calm their nerves as he led them down dozens of flights of stairs. He saved almost 2,700 lives. But when he went back in to help more people, he died. And after the dust settled, his name wasn't widely broadcast. Most didn't know the face or the voice behind the heroism. While politicians and military leaders and media personalities became household names, this humble man's wisdom was overlooked by the crowds he helped to save. And that's exactly what Solomon describes in this morning's text. A poor wise man delivers a city. No one remembers him. And the tragedy isn't just forgetfulness. It's that wisdom is often rejected or forgotten because of who delivers it. And we often make foolish choices that silence wisdom before it can save us. And so Solomon is helping us to see wisdom is still better. But people will ignore it, resist it, and ruin it. And the truth is, we won't get there this morning, but the truth is sometimes we are those people. And so let's read our text together, and then we'll jump into his fourth observation. We'll begin in verse 13. It says, "The wisdom that I have seen also under the sun, and it seemed great unto me. There was a little city, and a few men within it, and there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered that same poor man." It's really interesting because here we have this city that has few men in it. And you would think that surely a man of such wisdom would have been known. But he lives in obscurity. Solomon says this, "Then said I, wisdom is better than strength." And that is true. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly in him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is as at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him. And he saith to everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. And so as we look at this fourth observation of Solomon, we find this: wisdom is often ignored and forgotten because people are fickle. Let's look first at verses 13 through 15. We see wisdom that Solomon, this wisdom have I also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. And this wisdom that Solomon is speaking of is the same wisdom that he speaks of throughout Ecclesiastes and throughout the book of Proverbs. It is that skill in living rightly under God's design. But he also makes this statement. He says it seemed great, and the idea was it is an important thing. It was a very significant observation. This was a big deal to Solomon as one who calls wisdom the principal thing. Why was this significant? Solomon gives much of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs to the importance of wisdom, but we need to be reminded that Proverbs are good and true, but that they also exist and are lived in a broken world. And so just as you and I would stand and scratch our head when wisdom is so clearly given, but it is either ignored or forgotten in our culture, so Solomon is scratching his head at how wisdom is treated in his culture. And so Solomon tells of this small city under siege by a powerful king. The enemy has it surrounded, and starvation is setting in. Please forgive me. I'm going to remove this because it's been dry. And dry doesn't always work with my throat. Hope is gone in this city until the people turn to an unlikely source. A poor, obscure man. He's not sitting on the mayor's council. He's not at the city banquets. He's not trending on TikTok. He simply lived life with the quiet skill of wisdom. And somehow, we're not told how, he delivers the city without an army and without strength. Now you think that they would honor him for life, right? There would be a parade, there would be a memorial, a statue. Surely the leader of the city would offer him the key to the city, but this man is just forgotten. Here is Solomon scratching his head. Why? Because people are fickle. They'll seek wisdom in desperation, but abandon it when crisis passes. Will you remember this as we draw some application here? 1 Corinthians says this: God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the strong. People are drawn to power and wealth rather than wisdom. The truly wise are often forgotten and uncelebrated. And so what can we learn from this? Well, first is this: don't give up on wise living because you feel overlooked or you feel that you're missing out. Kidner makes this observation in his commentary. He says, wisdom does not always come with a spotlight. Its effectiveness is often hidden behind poverty or obscurity. Beloved, I want you to process this. Many times, the best place that we can live is in obscurity. Sometimes the best life to live is a quiet life. That's not to say that we should hide in the shadows or that we should cloister away in a commune. I'm saying that with the spotlight comes the pressure of people and their expectations, and often those pressures bring the temptation to compromise wisdom and biblical truth. So don't give in to the temptation to compromise biblical values that you are instilling into your children's lives just because another family who is not doing that seems happier. Don't give in to the temptation to compromise biblical values with your kids because it seems like it is easier and they will like you more. Don't give in to the temptation to compromise wisdom at work when your coworker takes the unethical, easy way out and gets the promotion. Don't give in to the temptation to compromise wisdom when your relationship or with your relationships because that's what love does. Or because someone will give you acceptance or approval. Beloved, the temptation is strong. The world would have us compromise our wisdom and biblical values. And then we find ourselves sitting on the heap with them, wondering why we are living a filled life instead of a full life. Don't give in to the temptation. I believe that if we could insert ourselves into the parable that Solomon is telling here, and we could look into the life of the poor man, I believe that this poor wise man, we would see him happily going back into his obscurity. It's kind of like the country mouse. You remember the story of the country mouse and the city mouse? The country mouse is content with his simple meals and peaceful nights, and one day his city cousin visits. He's got his smartwatch on his paw and his iCheese phone in his tail pocket, and he says, "You haven't lived until you've seen my home." The city, the feast, it dazzles the country mouse about all that he talks about, cheese and crackers and pastry everywhere. And so he goes to visit. But every time they sit to eat, danger strikes. A cat suddenly pounces in the room. A roaring Roomba goes through and they're sent scrambling. And finally, the country mouse says, "This may be delicious, but it's never peaceful here. I'll take my quiet life back in the fields." City mouse shrugs and he'd rather risk his life than give up the table. And that's Solomon's point. I want you to think about this. People will trade wisdom for luxury. They will trade peace for danger. They will trade truth for comfort as long as the table looks full. People are fickle. They'll praise wisdom one day and they'll ignore it the next if something shinier comes along. Just like the city mouse, many are willing to live in constant threat if they think it means more. Even though the quiet wisdom of God offers something far better and safer, and that is a full life. And so don't be surprised that when the pressure is on, people will seek out answers. Understand this. People are going to seek out answers and carry out solutions in desperation that they would never consider and will refuse to continue when there is no trouble in their lives. And so just because they are seeking out help and wisdom from you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue in it, or that they will thank you, or that they will remember you for it. We find a third thing at the end of verse 15, because we see that forgotten hero. No one remembered that same poor man. And so don't be disappointed when you live by wisdom and you are soon forgotten. Wiersbe said this: the world often ignores the very people who could help it most. And so, beloved, don't look for your identity or your fulfillment in approval or in a following. Ecclesiastes has continually pointed us to find our fulfillment and our identity in God. Find your identity in fearing God and keeping His commandments. Find your identity in a life hidden in Christ. Paul writes to the Colossians, and he says this: set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are here on earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with Him in glory. Listen, when we are united with Christ in salvation, we are hidden with Him in God. We are to live as dead men to the things of this world. And the things of this world can never satisfy a child of the King. Our identity is found in Him. We are secure in Him. We are His children. We are not forgotten. We are His and He is ours. And so listen, though we may be obscure in the eyes of this world, one day we will appear with Him in glory. Don't be discouraged by living a life of biblical truth and wisdom. It's not always going to fit in this broken world. It's not always going to be accepted. And so we see that wisdom is affected by the fickleness of people, but we also see this: wisdom can be hindered by the sin and foolishness of others. And so Solomon's observation doesn't end with wisdom being ignored. He shows us that even when wisdom is present, sometimes it can be hindered or overpowered. Look with me at verses 16 through 18. Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. It's interesting as you look there at verse 16, we find the better than proverb that Solomon has given us in previous chapters. But I want you to notice something as well, because we find not just in Ecclesiastes, but even in Proverbs, this better than comparison that Solomon uses. He says, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. But do you see a difference in this proverb that we're looking at on the screen and the proverb that we see in verse 16? We find in our text the word nevertheless. Later on, we find the word but. And then a continuing observation. What is Solomon doing here? He's taking us through these proverbs that use the better than comparison, but he's adding in the reality of life under the sun, a broken world filled with sin and foolishness. So let's look at these proverbs. Verse 16, we see this, that wisdom is better, but it is often despised. Now, this word despised in verse 16 is a very interesting word. It has this idea to despise, to show contempt for, to think lightly of. And they go on to explain it this way in the lexicon, pertaining to feeling or contempt for an object because it is regarded to be bad or of little value, often with behaviors toward the object, including speaking scorn and ridicule, which correspond to the contempt. Now, I want us to think about this. I want us to see another place that this word despised is used. And we are very familiar with the story. It's found in Genesis 25 and verse 34. You remember Jacob and Esau fighting from before they were born. And we know that one of the issues between these two brothers was that Jacob tricked, deceived, he didn't really, Esau into buying the birthright, right? Took his birthright from him. Look at what it says here. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus what? Esau despised his birthright. Now, I want you to think about this and how this word has been used in Hebrew, in the Hebrew language. And it makes me wonder if Jacob and Esau had not been at odds over the birthright before. You see, this word despised is not just about a one-time occurrence, okay? It didn't just come about, and Esau was hungry, he sold his birthright to Jacob, and wiped his hand, wipes his mouth, walks away, I hate my birthright. I mean, you understand what the birthright is. That's the eldest son getting the mainstay of the inheritance and in essence being the patriarch of the family, okay? So this was a big thing. And it makes me wonder if maybe they had been at odds with the birthright before this, and maybe it's a frustration for Esau. I don't know. Perhaps Esau felt pressure as the bearer of the birthright to live up to an expectation. And we know that his attitude and his living style was not a pleasure to Isaac and Rebekah. Maybe he was just that fleshly and fickle-minded. Just didn't care about it. But regardless, it ended up being something that caused contempt for him, and in his heart, it was given very little value. Now, I want you to understand this. Let's bring us back into everyday life for us, okay? In a broken world, filled with broken, sinful hearts, the wisdom of God is held in contempt and given very little value. Why? Because without God, life is viewed simply as what you make of it. You ever heard somebody say that? Life's what you make of it. Why follow someone else's wisdom when I make my own truth, right? That's our world. That's the reality that Solomon is getting us to think about here. Don't assume that wisdom will always be accepted or praised by the crowd, and don't be shocked when it is despised and rejected. Time after time, beloved, I have heard believers say of the unsaved world, I can't believe they acted so unethically. Or I can't believe they would say such a thing. They're always so kind and nice. And we become enamored with unregenerate people and then are shocked when they do what comes naturally. Now, I'm not saying that we just push all unsaved, unregenerate people out of our lives. But I am saying that the close relationships that are built are a temptation to compromise our biblical thinking and God's wisdom. Listen, beloved, the teabag principle is true for both believers and unbelievers. You remember the teabag principle? When the hot water is poured on, what is inside comes out. Now, even sadder, I want you to think about this. We as believers have been guilty of the same thing. Perhaps life happens, and after we make a wise and biblical, God-honoring choice, and we become very bitter and angry. And rather than understanding what Solomon is teaching us here and continuing in wisdom and continuing to pursue a full life in the fear of God and obedience to His commandments, we begin to hold God's wisdom in contempt. We despise it. And we find ourselves saying things like, I tried it God's way once and it didn't work. I'm going to do it my way. What are we doing? We're living, demanding that the law of retribution only exist in this life. Let me tell you something, beloved. We ought to be grateful that the law of retribution isn't limited to just this life. Wouldn't that be awful? To go into eternity and all your rewards were gained in a life that they're all left behind. No. We shouldn't demand that. We shouldn't live that way. Dear friend, the law of retribution extends beyond this life. God's purposes in your life are beyond your understanding and view. Ours is to trust a sovereign God and know that He works all things together for good to them that love Him. And He is working it for His glory. Romans 8 and verse 18 says, For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Listen, beloved, we need to stop living life as if life is only under the sun. And we need to start living life under the gracious hand of a sovereign God who knows us, who sees us, who loves us, and is working His plan in us for our good and for His glory. Don't be like those in this broken, sinful world. Trust God. Yes, it is hard sometimes. Yes, it makes no sense sometimes. But God knows what He is doing. Fear Him and obey His commandments. I want you to look at the final two Proverbs in verses 17 and 18. Look at the two phrases there, because we find in these Proverbs that one loud or sinful voice can do great harm. You see the phrases there, the cry of him that ruleth among fools, and one sinner destroys much good. And boy, that word destroy, I mean, it's ruin. It is absolute ruin. And so one loud or sinful voice can outweigh many wise ones, especially in positions of influence. I want you to think about this as we just are drawing to a close here, because we're not going to be able to make it into chapter 10. We'll touch that next week. But do you remember the account of Achan? Joshua chapter 7. Look at the opening words with me. But the children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing. Isn't that peculiar? Isn't that a strange way to open up the narrative of what happened to Achan and what Achan did? Do you remember what Achan did? God said, okay, when you go in to Jericho and you destroy the city, you are not to take anything out of the city. You leave it there. It is a sacrifice to me. Don't touch it. And so they go into the city, and what does Achan do? He sees the Babylonish garments, he sees the gold, and he sees the silver, and he takes them and he buries them in the midst of his tent. And we look at it and we say, well, whose fault is this? What would our natural response be? You can answer out loud. Whose fault would it be? Achan's, right? But isn't it interesting that the chapter opens that way? But the children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing. I want you to think about that in light of this proverb. Because a foolish voice, or one loud or sinful voice, can do great harm. What happened with Achan? His sin affected his family, and it affected 36 other families. Do you remember what happened at the Battle of Ai? God gave them defeat. There were lives lost. Why? Because of Achan's sin. All right, I want to be careful, because we could apply this to the extreme and say that your one sin is going to, destroy everybody around you and your entire family. That may not be the case, but it can. It can. One loud voice, one sinful voice, one foolish voice can do much harm. One sinner, verse 18 says, destroys much good. Achan's sin affected his family. He hid the garments and the gold and the silver in his tent. They had to know about it. And his sin and his voice brought great destruction. And I ask you this morning, just as we close this out and we kind of prepare our minds to go into the next section next week. But what voices are you allowing into your life? What voices are you allowing to speak to your children? What influences are you allowing to shape your beliefs, your thinking, and actions? Listen, beloved, they come from all over. Some are subtle. Some are overt. It can come from the things that we read. It can come from the games that we play. It can come from the friends that we allow into our inner circle. And sometimes they fly right in our face, and sometimes they just fly under the radar. But the truth is this, beloved, it only takes one. It only takes one voice. It only takes one foolish sin. And that thought continues into chapter 10. And you'll have to come next week to hear it. But friend, this morning, listen, Solomon's words are not meant to make us cynical. They're meant to make us steadfast, to bring us to a steadfast, faithful God who is in control. And people may forget you. They may despise the wisdom that you live by. They may even reject God's truth when it's right in front of them. But you are not forgotten. You are hidden with Christ in God. And the one who saves you sees you. He sees your quiet acts of faithfulness. So, beloved, live wisely, even if the crowd doesn't notice, even if people are going the opposite direction. Fear God, keep His commandments, trust that He is working all things for your good and His glory. And when you feel the pull to compromise, remember, wisdom may be ignored now, but in eternity it will be made known. And friend, if you are here searching this morning, Solomon's picture of life under the sun is life without God. And it always ends the same way. Empty, fragile, forgotten. You can fill your days and your heart and your mind with the noise of this world, but one day those voices will fade, those things will fade away, and you will be standing before the God who gave you this life. What will your answer be to Him? How would you respond? Listen, the truth is this: without Christ, your wisdom, your strength, your efforts, your plans will not stand in that day. You will not be able to say, oh God, I was a good person. God, I planned to do things right. God, I went to church every Sunday. God, I was baptized. God, I went to Sunday school. God, I was confirmed. God, I tried to do the best I could. No, friend. Solomon is turning us this morning. If you are searching for answers, if you do not know Christ and have a personal relationship with Him, he is turning you to Christ and saying that is the only way for you to have a fulfilled life. That is the only way for you to know that your eternity is secure. We know we live in a broken world. We know that this world is filled with sin. We know that we are all sinners. And the truth is this: God would not be loving and gracious and merciful if He were not a God of wrath and justice. And the truth is this: because there is sin, God demands a price for it. His wrath is upon it. And we as sinners deserve His wrath. He would cease to be God if that were not so. But isn't it a wonderful thing to know that Jesus Christ came and lived a perfect life, fulfilled all of the law, and He went to a cross, nailed there by sinful man, willingly laid His life down and bore the fury of God's wrath for my sin. Here's the wonderful thing. It is through faith in Him that we can live a full life. Our sin, the penalty of it, can be taken care of. And you know what begins to happen? When we come to Christ and we place our faith in Him, we enter into a relationship with Christ. We put our faith in His finished work for us on the cross. You know what begins to happen? Ecclesiastes begins to make more sense. Life has context. We have this stirring and urging within us called the Holy Spirit. And He's given to us, and He reminds us day by day, live in biblical wisdom. Live the full life that is fearing God and obeying His commandments. Oh, life is not easy, but the truth is, beloved, life is not easy for anyone. But far better to live life in the hands of a sovereign God who loves you. So if you're here this morning and you're searching for answers, and you know the weight of your sin is bearing down on you, and God has been speaking to your heart, He's knocking on your heart's door, don't leave this morning not taking the opportunity to come to Him. This could be the most wonderful day of your life. Will it fix all your problems? No, it won't fix all your problems, but it will put you safe and secure in the hands of a God who loves you. That's a wonderful thing. We bow our heads for a moment this morning. Rachel's going to come and play a verse of invitation. And it's not often that I ask a question and ask people to respond in this way, but in this moment, it's just you and God. The Spirit of God speaking to your heart. Perhaps you're here this morning and you would say, Pastor Chris, God's been dealing with me about my salvation. God's been dealing with me about my sin. I need to deal with this with God. I can feel Him at work in my heart right now. Maybe God's speaking to you that way this morning. Listen, I want to pray for you. That's not gonna save you, but I want to pray for you. And maybe you would just lift your hand, and no one's looking around. It's just me, and I won't call your name out. I would never do something like that. But you say, Pastor Chris, God is dealing in my heart this morning. Amen. Listen, this is what I would encourage you to do. Don't leave here without dealing with your eternity. There are people here. I would love to speak with you. Laura would love to speak with you. There are others here who would love to sit and make sure that you understand, that you know that you don't have to be under God's wrath, that you can come to Christ and put your faith in what He did for you. And so in this moment, God's speaking to your heart. Would you do business with Him? Listen, if you're here without Christ, God's speaking to your heart this morning. Let me ask this. If you would be willing to speak with somebody, would you just look up at me? Listen, the offer is free to you. I'm going to send somebody back, and they're going to take some time to share the word with you. Is that okay? All right. It's Caleb. Listen, believer, friend, this morning, don't leave here living life as an unregenerate person. Don't live here cynical about God's wisdom and truth. If you've got to give some things back to Him, I beg you to do it now. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the reminder today. We can be discouraged in this life so many times. We can be tempted to just give up. But Lord, thank you that you are a gracious, loving, sovereign God who is in control, and we can trust you. And we can, with confidence, even in the difficult times of life, live fearing you and keeping your commandments. Lord, I pray that you would encourage those who may be going through some difficult times. They're facing those temptations. The battle is hard against them. Lord, encourage them. Lift up their heart this morning. Lord, I pray for those this morning who may be just doing business with you right now. They've been wrestling with a bitter heart or an angry heart. Lord, I pray that they would let go. They would give those things to you, trust you with their life. Father, thank you for speaking to our hearts this morning. Lord, may this help us, challenge us, conform us to the image of Christ. In Jesus' name.